Start over. Hello everybody, welcome to today's Gradulting workshop. The topic today is taxes. Yes, it is the dreaded taxes, but the reason we're here is to make things easier for you, our international students. My name is Debbie McCutsky, and I'm the coordinator of services and programs for Graduate Student Legal Aid. This workshop is co-sponsored by a few offices who are working to make your life while you're here at UMD a bit easier. I'm happy to introduce Amanda Strausser. Amanda is the assistant to Dean Fetter at the Graduate School, and the Graduate School is always looking out for you. I'm also happy to introduce Gabby Gillespie. She is the Integration Program Manager for ITINs, and you all know that ITINs has your back. So, before I introduce our speaker, I just have a few announcements. Automatic closed captioning has been enabled for those of you who want to read along. We welcome your questions and comments. We know there will be lots of them, which is why we're using a webinar format today. And we will make every effort to respond to your questions. So be patient with us. And finally, we will email links to a post-workshop survey, the slides, and the recording. We're going to try to do that later this afternoon. It might not happen till tomorrow morning, but we will follow up with you. Everyone who registered will get an email, so watch out for that. So let's get started with the topic of the day, taxes. I am so pleased to introduce our speaker. He has been with us doing this workshop for, I don't know, it's like 5 years now. And his name is Professor Samuel Handwerger. Sam is with the Smith School of Business as an adjunct professor. But you know, the reason he's here today is he is an advisor for Terp Tax. And we hope that you have seen announcements for Terp Tax, and we'll talk about that more today. It is a terrific free resource right here on campus. So I am going to turn things over to Sam. Take it away.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here and to help the school and help our students. So I'm going to go share screen so we can take a look at my slides, and we will take it away. We're here to talk about the tax requirements for international students. Generally speaking, we're talking about visa status F1 and J1, and therefore, if that's you, this is for you. So let's take a look at what our agenda is here today. First, we'll do a quick introduction. We'll talk about the forms that you're going to be possibly required to file, some for sure. Talk about some of the forms that go into the preparation, which is the W-2 and FICA tax issues, preparing the form, other forms that you might need, filing your returns. And then the big question for the day would be the state and city taxes or local taxes. And then we'll have any closing Q&A session as we get to the end. And we answer questions along the way on an as-needed basis. All right, so the introduction is, as said, even though your visa status shows you as not being a resident of the United States, and you would think, well, you don't have legal requirements to pay taxes to the US, to the extent that you have US source income, there's the green for money. If you have US source income, which means you have income from sources within the United States, it's sort of that simple. Income from sources within the United States, you probably have to report that on an income tax return, which we do annually. It's an annual requirement. The due date is April 15th. It's based on a calendar year. 4/15 is the due date, and that is the requirement that you're going to need to meet. There's another form everyone has to do under F1 visa status, and I can't emphasize in this introduction, we'll move forward in a second, but I can't overemphasize the need to really pay attention to this, because as you are aware, possibly more than I am aware, the sensitivity when moving your status from F1 or J1 to H1B, and then further, say for green card or permanent residence of the United States, the government sensitivity for that is high. Any failure to live up to what your visa requirements are, which includes proper reporting of income tax, could jeopardize that. So we're here to make sure that that doesn't become your issue as you progress. All right, the tax forms that you'll need are Schedule Form 1040 non-resident, if you indeed qualify as a non-resident. And we're going to talk about if you do or don't, but if you do qualify as a non-resident, these are the forms that will possibly be needed for you. If you have to report any kind of income as a non-resident, you will definitely use these two forms. We'll say that again so we can make sure that you've got it. But those are the two forms that you'll certainly have to report if you have any kind of US source income. So there are two different forms that get filed. One is a Form 1040, one is a 1040 non-resident. And the issue that comes up is that if you are F1 and you are considered to be, for tax purposes, non-resident under your F1 or J1 status, then you only can file this form. You cannot file this. If you somehow mistakenly filed the 1040, which could happen through some third-party tax service, for which I won't name the names, but some third-party tax services do not do a Form 1040 non-resident NR, and you would wind up mistakenly file Form 1040, you do need to go back and correct that, because the tax results are not the same when both forms. They're very different. And you would want to amend the prior year's incorrect filings of the 1040 to make them 1040 NR. Fortunately, the government, the United States, the Internal Revenue Service, which oversees the tax filing system, has recognized this as a sort of common problem, and they actually have a fairly easy way of making the amendment. It's not terrible, and it won't cost you, it wouldn't cost you anything if you use Terp Tax, but it wouldn't cost you a whole lot of time to get it done. So it's not as bad as it sounds.
I know you'll
Yes.
cover this in a second,
Okay.
and maybe that is the next slide. The difference between a non-resident and a resident.
We're there. I practiced this with somebody before the webinar.
I knew it.
And they're right on cue. So it's perfect timing. So let's go for it. Let's find out when you file which, and make sure most of you are going to be here, but let's see why. All U.S. citizens filed the 1040. So if you're a U.S. citizen, if you were lucky to be born here or you became a citizen, that's you. However, for non-U.S. citizens, bullet 2 here, you would also file a 1040 if you already have a green card or you pass the substantial presence test. Substantial presence test is a matter of number of days that you've been here. And generally speaking, it's 183 days in a calendar year, although there's two different types of tests. But let's just go with that for now. 183 days in 1 year, and you will be a resident. However, as it says here, international students on these visas can use 1040 NR only if they are exempt from the substantial presence test. So the question is, when are they exempt from the substantial presence? Meaning they can't count their days and they can't become a 1040 resident for tax purposes. So when is that? And here it is. Simple language: if you are F, J, M, or Q for less than 5 calendar years or up to 5 calendar years, you're considered non-resident automatically. And you have to, it shouldn't just say should, you have to file 1040 NR, cannot file the Form 1040, unless you're married to a U.S. citizen or a U.S. resident, a green card holder, then you have other options. But if you're single or your married spouse doesn't live here and is not a resident or citizen here or a green card holder here, you're gonna have to file 1040 NR. So it really should be 5 calendar years. The first 5 calendar years that you're here, your days do not count. This is explaining why. Days do not count for the substantial presence test. And therefore, since you don't meet 183 days, you don't have any days to count, you automatically wind up getting relegated to a non-resident for tax purposes.
So Sam,
Yes.
if I enter the United States for the first time in 2021, I
Mhm.
can safely assume that I will be filing as a non-resident.
Correct.
Understood.
Let's do a little fun and games. We get to draw here. You get the picture. In the event that you first enter the US in 21, and if you've been here, you can do it going backwards and figure it out. Each of these years, and we count 5, it's as simple as that. All these calendar years, your days do not count. It doesn't matter when you arrived in 2021, that's 1 calendar year. And it doesn't matter like if the date that you arrived expires in 2025, that year still doesn't count for days and you're still not a resident. That's why I said, emphasize calendar years. First 5 calendar years, non-resident. Only in 2026, in this example, if you then meet the 183-day rule, then you can file as a resident that year. So it's a little more complicated than I'm making it, but for purposes of knowing whether you can file a 1040 regular or a 1040 NR, this is basically the rule. This applies to F1, F2, J1, J2, and some other visa statuses. All right. The due date for the return is April 15th. Generally, this year will be April 18th because of some kind of holiday in the District of Columbia, but generally it's the 15th. You can get an extension. Extensions are not hard to get. They're automatic if you file the right form, and you can do it online. It's easy to do, and you get an extension for 6 months. Now, I only caution you that if you do get an extension, you need to know that you have to pay any money that you might owe. You have to pay that by the due date of April 15th. If you don't owe any money and the IRS owes you, the federal government owes you money, then an extension is automatic by filing online or the form, and you don't have to worry about anything except you're just delaying getting your refund. And I don't discourage people from filing for the amendment if it makes sense. There's nothing that would hold up your visa status. It's perfectly legal to do so. This is a warning to any of you who have been here for a couple of years already. In the event that you received for 2020 or 2021 or both, because it was in both of those years, 2020 and 2021, if you received a stimulus refund check from the United States government, it might have seemed like, oh, money from heaven, which is where the US government makes their laws, somewhere in government heaven. And if you receive one of these checks and you are in your first 5 calendar years for this non-resident status, that money does not belong to you. It must be refunded. And you want to take care of that sooner than later. Again, you don't want to have somebody from immigration saying, you got this money and you're not allowed to get it. So what did you do? You do want to show that you have made the attempt to return it. The IRS has specific instructions on how to do that. And
Sam,
so
that sounds really scary. So let's say I did get it. Who can
Okay.
help me with this? Because I
So-
know I'm going to have to file an amendment. There's going to be
Yes.
some payments. And so how do we do this?
Okay, and that's a great question, because how would it have happened? Let's clear the ink for a minute. How would it have happened that you got this? There's a really good answer for this. You filed incorrectly Form 1040. So there's mistake number 1. This is a case, in order to have received these checks, you made 2 things had to happen. First of all, you had to make the mistake of filing a 1040. Secondly, well, I guess it's a corollary to this mistake. That would have gotten you this money, which you're not supposed to get. So what you have to do is you have to stop and say, okay, first thing I need to do is I need to contact Terp Tax or somebody adverse in tax law and say, how do I, and you could call the IRS, you might be on hold for a couple hours. So Terp Tax might be a faster way. Contact Terp Tax. I'm going to leave my email at the end. You can send me an email. I might be able to direct you to the IRS site real quickly, or just a form to help you refund the money. That's number 1. And number 2, then you're going to need to file the correct form for the prior years, the 1040 NR. That's how you would have gotten this payment. You must have had filed that 1040. If you filed it correctly and a 1040 was for you, you were a resident for tax purposes, then keep the money. That's fine. But if you see, oh, I filed an 18. Let's do a little example. I filed an 18 and NR. That would have gotten you the refunds or the stimulus payments in 2020. Then you filed another, you did it again. I'm sorry, let me just fix that. You filed a 1040 regular in 18. That would have gotten you the care payments in 2020. And then in 19, you repeated the mistake and filed a resident return, and that would have gotten you the stimulus payments for 2021. So now those two mistakes have to be corrected and the money has to go back. It does sound nightmarish. Don't worry. The amended returns are fairly straightforward. Do those. And returning the money is also fairly straightforward, assuming you have the money in your checking account. And if you don't, you can make arrangements to pay it back on an installment agreement with the IRS. So don't panic, but don't delay. It's not like there's a due date. The due date would be the next time you're going to go for a visa status change, or when immigration services outside of the school, that is going to start looking at your compliance with your visa. That's when you want to make sure this is all done by. So I'm not sure that's a panic situation.
Sam, would you say that in your experience that when this filing is happening, is students or scholars that are using a service like Terp Tax or TaxSlayer, which are typically filing and available for resident aliens and not for non-resident aliens?
In the past, TurboTax has been a problem because you could go to the website and be led to believe that you've complied with tax law and all you did was file the regular form 1040, not realizing through their algorithms that you were really required to file a 1040 non-resident. This year is the first year that TurboTax has actually gotten a little bit better on their website to alert you that, wait a minute, you might need to file a 1040 NR. They don't do it for free. They've got a service that they have linked with, and they'll send you there. You will pay for it. It's not that expensive, but it's you can still get all that done for free at Terp Tax. However, that's what you want to make sure of, is you're filing the right forms. So if you're using any other service other than Sprint Tax, which is what TurboTax is now partnered with, or Terp Tax for that matter, you got to make sure you're filing the right form. Don't feel that the service will lead you to nirvana automatically. The algorithms are not that good in the prior years prior to 2021. That help?
Yes, that's terrific. And then a question that may cause more confusion is, do I need a social security number in order to file my taxes?
If you don't have a social security number and you're not eligible to get a social security number, then you need to file a W-7 form to get what's called a ITIN, Individual Taxpayer Identification Number. Only if you're not eligible for Social Security are you allowed to file this, and you get to file this with the form. So you don't have to delay filing your tax requirements, your tax compliance forms. You can file it and you file the W-7 with it. There is an issue of when you file for your ITIN with a W-7, you're supposed to send in original documentations, which is generally a passport. And nobody thinks that it's a good idea to put a passport in the mail, even to the Internal Revenue Service. So we do have a possibility of hooking you up with somebody who can, for a very minimal fee, avoid sending that in the mail and save you the trouble of putting it in the mail, the original document, your original passport, and still getting the W-7. So that's something, again, Terp Tax can link you up with as a resource.
Great. I think I'll let you carry on now because I'm going to get into more form questions that I know you're going to get to. So thank you, Sam.
No problem. You're quite welcome. So I have a good audience there. All right. All right. It says new Form 1040 NR because new is the fact that when you file a 1040 non-resident, in the past, oftentimes you only needed to file that. Now they have it where it's automatic. If you have to file, you're going to file two forms, 1040 non-resident and something called Schedule OI. Don't worry, again, I'll tell you when to worry. Don't worry, because the software will do both automatically. Whether you're using Terp Tax or any other service that does the 1040 NR, it'll be used automatically. These other forms might be necessary, but in my experience, rarely. Rarely do you use them. The NEC is if you're acting as an independent contractor and someone gives you a form 1099 NEC. See the correspondence there? It means non-employment compensation. So then you would need that. And Schedule A would be is if you have any charitable contributions that you made, you can take that on Schedule A. If you had any state income taxes that we'll get to later, if you paid any of those, they could go to Schedule A. And Schedules 1, 2, and 3 are to report other kinds of income, which generally speaking, F1 students do not have. That would be other US source income, not foreign source. But generally, most foreign students don't have that. Oops, okay. So recap, Schedule OI required if you have to file the 1040 NR, and just about any kind of income US source will require you to file the 1040 NR. Schedule A, you may or may not use, it depends. The standard deduction, which is a nice deduction to get, only applies to US citizens or permanent residents here in the United States, except if you're from India. So if you're from India, you're lucky you have a nice treaty with the US, you get to take the standard deduction. What that means for our population of wonderful students from India is that the likelihood of you having to pay US tax on US source income is fairly small because the standard deduction is way up there close to 13,000. I think it's like 12,800 this year. So it means like the first $12,800 of US source income will be tax free to you. So that's nice. And that's not true of anybody else from any other place in the world. And here we just, as a recap, the NEC in Schedules 1, 2, and 3, very less common, and you will know it if you get a Form 1099 of any sort. There's a series of forms reporting other US source income. It's called the Forms 1099. If you get those in the mail from any place, like a US bank or an employer that you thought was an employer, or they're paying you as independent contractor, let's say, then these forms go towards your tax filing obligation. You'll use that in the preparation of your return. Either your preparer will use it, or if you're online software, you're going to be entering that information to get these forms basically done. That's where that information would come from. Abby, we doing good so far?
This might be a very specific question, but how do we identify, how do we know which countries have treaties with the
Okay,
US?
we can talk about that now. It's a wonderful thing called irs.gov. Wonderful because you don't have to stay on hold, and the service has been working pretty good. So you get on irs.gov, or just go on a Google search and put in US, then your country's name, tax treaty. If I do the following search, US, China, tax treaty, it will take me to the irs.gov site that has all the treaties that we have with countries, and I'll find the US-China tax treaty. It'll take me right, the search engine that'll be the first thing that pops up. That's where you want to go. We have treaties with 68 countries right now. So the chances are that your country does have a tax treaty with the US. If it doesn't, it's usually because, and no offense to anybody, but if we don't have a tax treaty, it's usually a country we don't have real friendly relationships with. That doesn't mean you're not welcome here. Okay. All right.
And so a follow-up to that is, does that mean all citizens of India are required to file a Schedule A?
Actually, because of the standard deduction, you will never, almost never file Schedule A. You won't have to. The standard deduction will be automatic on your return. It will be automatic because you put it into the software. I'm from India. The software should recognize that and give you the standard deduction automatically. Okay.
All right, this is a good one. Another follow-up to that. We're going to drive home this point right now, Sam.
Okay.
I'm going to grade you on your response.
Okay.
The question is, I just came to the United States last August, I'm assuming August 2021, and I am not a resident. So I can't use softwares like Terp Tax. Is there any other online software that I can use, or do I have to use a paper document?
Okay, so we will clear the deck and answer that question for everybody at this moment. What I do know is you can pay for Sprint tax. I do not get a commission. Maybe I should have arranged for one, but you can go on Sprint tax. They do a pretty good job of 1040 NR. So that's a good place, but they do charge you money. Your other choice, and I do encourage you to use it because it's here on campus. You go to terptax.org. How did I get the right, just look up terptax.org. And I think that's not exactly the right, I don't even have the right URL here, but if you look up terptax.org, you will find it online. Go there and we'll send that out after the meeting. They'll do it for free. They'll help you for free. Glacier, if Glacier's still around, they also do 1040 NRs. So let's mention Glacier. They also do the 1040 NR. The only thing about Glacier is up until at least the last time I checked is they do not do the state return. So you'd have to arrange to get the state tax return on your own.
You're correct. So I'm going to back up one time.
Go ahead.
So Terp Tax, Sam, is the program that you lead here on campus, and our students would be able to use it to file both a federal and a state tax return. And that would be done electronically. This is a way that they could do so electronically.
That's correct.
Great.
These are all e-filers. They all file electronically.
There we go.
Right.
And the Glacier does not give you an opportunity to do state tax, and it's a software that will walk you through the filing, but you'd still mail your documents.
Okay, I'm not familiar with, if Glacier doesn't do the e-filing, that would be correct. Yeah.
Correct. Okay, great. I hope that it's clear to everyone. So I think the driving home the point here is Terp Tax would be your ideal first place stop shop for you to do both your state and your federal in an e-file, and you know that you're in great hands because Sam is in charge.
The other thing with Terp Tax, which is a little bit new this year, is if you are inclined to do the input yourself, just let us know when you make your appointment. Let us know, and we can arrange for you to self-input under our guidance. We'll have to assign you a supervisor, but you don't have to do a whole lot with the supervisor. If you know what you're doing, you can certainly just do the input on your own. The software is user-friendly. It's algorithmic, where they ask you the questions one by one. If you're pretty good and you want to really learn how to prepare taxes for forms 1040 non-resident, it could be an interesting experience. So certainly encourage you to do it either way. Okay.
Okay, we still have more questions about the treaties. So are all countries with tax treaties supposed to file Schedule A?
No, you only file Schedule A if you have the ability to itemize certain deductions, which are generally any payments that you make of a state tax. If you do a state tax payment, that would go in Schedule A, or if you make charity. That's about the only two exceptions that would exist. So that's the only time Schedule A would come into place in those two instances. Short of that,
is the treaty applied, like the tax treaty is applied at the standard deduction? Is that what you mentioned before?
Okay. Yeah, I see the confusion. So let's try to unconfuse. Schedule A would be if you have any of the two deductions we just mentioned. That would be for Schedule A, and they would go on there. And again, the software or the preparer would ask you, did you make any charity or did you pay any state income tax? And if you did, then you get to put it on Schedule A. It'll have some effect on your taxes if you have a fairly large amount of U.S. source income. Otherwise, if you're from India, you probably are not going to do Schedule A because you get the standard deduction. So that's what the exception's all about. So this is sort of, let's circle this. This is everybody, and this is like everybody else only from India. So the whole world's up here, and India will probably not have to do Schedule A because the standard deduction is so high. And I'd also like to I don't want to discourage the questions on this at all, don't get me wrong, but the likelihood of you needing deductions on Schedule A to save income tax is fairly small because most of you will wind up having zero tax to pay anyway, since most of your US source income will not be taxable. You do have to file the 1040. We're going to go over that later. You still have to file, but under circumstances of scholarships and treaties, a lot of your income is not going to be taxable, or the tax has already been taken out by the school, for example. The school may have already recognized what is taxable and they've taken that out. And so you won't owe any money. It's already been done. So saving taxes with Schedule A is very minimal, if at all.
Great. I think it's another question you get a lot is, I did file my taxes with Terp Tax, but I didn't receive any tax refund. Should I be concerned about that?
If you were supposed to get a tax refund, you should have some concern, but it's probably not something that Terp Tax did, although you should contact them. The Internal Revenue Service is backed by millions of returns. Some of them go back to 2019, where the refunds haven't been issued, and there's still millions of returns behind in 2020. So we have a situation where you are amongst a lot of people, but what you want to do is you want to first double check with Terp Tax to make sure that the electronic filing went through. If that's true, then the next thing you want to do is see how long it's been since the electronic filing was done. If it was done over 4 or 5 months ago, then you probably want to start calling the Internal Revenue Service to make sure they got the return. If it's within the last 4 or 5 months, I wouldn't suggest getting online with or on phone with the IRS, because they're probably going to just tell you we got it. It's just going to take another month or two. They are catching up, so be patient.
All right, I've got more, but I'll wait for you to carry with your presentation.
All right, let's go. But stop me if you see something. Okay, let's go forward. All right, there is a form that everyone has to file, regardless of whether you have income or not. So if you don't, even if you don't have income from US sources, so let's say you have none, everyone still has to file this. So this is everyone. I'll erase the board so we can go over it, but I just want to emphasize everyone for your first 5 years when you're F1. While you're a student during the first 5 years. And what the Form 8843 does is it tells the Internal Revenue Service, hey, I'm an F1 visa and I'm within my first 5 years. If you're J1, it's telling them that I'm within my first 2 years and I'm a non-resident. So for F1 in the first 5 calendar years, 8843, you fill it out. It's easy to do. Glacier does it almost, I think they do it automatically when you get your Glacier account. It's there. You can mail that in if you don't have to file anything else. You can file it with your 1040 non-resident return electronically. And it tells the government, I'm a non-resident because my days do not count. Everyone needs to file that form. There's the word. In English, mandatory, must do it. Whether you file a tax return or not. So you can have no income, you still have to file. We spoke about tax treaties. When you do your return, you'll want to at least know whether or not the treaty means anything. If you have US source income, then you'll probably be concerned about what kind of income that is, and then you can use Terp Tax or look for the treaty on your own. The tax treaty articles that cover students are usually like Articles 20, 21, depending on your treaty, or 23, somewhere in that range they go. And they'll tell you how much of your income is taxable due to the treaty. So they might say compensation, first $5,000 is tax-free. They might say that. And then only after that do you pay tax. Or they might say scholarships are not taxable or they are taxable. And we're going to talk about that. So don't ask any questions on that one just yet. We're going to talk about scholarships and the treaties. So let's go forward. So here we are. Non-residents home country may have a tax treaty. Yes, to avoid double taxation. Okay, good. So we already mentioned India and the US under Article 21, paragraph 2, allows Indian people to use the standard deduction, which is a great way of reducing taxes if you have significant US source income. So that we've covered. Number 2, here's an example of different countries and where the articles are in different treaties and what do they do. For example, China in Article 20C, for an unlimited number of years while you're here under status of non-resident, you have or F1, I should say, even if you're just F1, even after 5 years, if you're F1 visa or J1 visa, you can get $5,000 of compensation tax-free. It's under the treaty. It's pretty easy to put it on the returns. If you're using a tax software system, it's pretty easy. And that's what these treaties are doing. And you can see every country is a little different. And where you find the articles in the treaty are all a little different. Have fun reading the treaty. We'll help you. We're glad to help you.
Sam, can I back up for a second? I think
Sure.
that perhaps the folks on the call maybe have a misunderstanding, or maybe I'm misunderstanding, is that it is very typical and perhaps even the norm in the United States that we all use some type of service to file our taxes. So I just want to give perspective, because I know that tax filing is very different in the United States, and I don't pretend to know what they are in other countries and whether or not you even file taxes. So I just want to give a reassurance to folks online and watching us that the fact that you're needing help to do this is no different than somebody who has lived in the United States their whole lives. Am I correct in that, Sam, that most people are using some type of support in order to do this, because that's how complicated our system is? I just want to give it context.
Yes, that's a great question, and I can address that because I do teach the Introduction to International Taxation. Many countries outside the United States have systems where if you're a certain type of person, that they tell you what to pay in tax. So you don't file a tax return. That exists in many countries. So this is unusual to have to file a tax return. In the United States, we have what's called a self-assessment system. That's what the language is. We self-assess ourselves what our taxes should be. And we do that through a tax return. That's the US system, a self-assessment. It's kind of crazy if you think about it, because what they're basically saying to you is, you, the taxpayer, whether you're resident or non-resident, you tell us what you owe in taxes. Well, if I was not born here, my initial reaction would be, I don't know anything. That's what I would tell you. But they do have audit capability. That's what the Internal Revenue Service does, the IRS. They have the ability to check your self-assessment to see, is it right? And if they disagree, then they're going to tell you, guess what? We're going to change your tax self-assessment to what it should be. If it looks like you owe, you'll owe. Sometimes they'll tell you you overdid it. You don't owe as many taxes as you said you did, and they'll give you the money back. But we have to do it ourselves. Good?
Great. Thank you, Sam. I appreciate that.
Okay. That was a fundamentally good question, because it was a fundamental question. All right. This one is real important if you're going to or you are working in the United States. Working in the United States means you have US source income. And it also means that if you're F1 in those crucial first 5 years or J1 in the first crucial 2 years, you do not have to pay these taxes. You will get a W-2. The W-2, I'm going to show you what it looks like, will show you what your earnings were at the end of the year, so you can file your tax return, do that self-assessment system. But you are not supposed to pay, and you don't have to, and you shouldn't pay what we call Social Security taxes under the acronym of FICA. That's the acronym, they're Social Security taxes. I'm going to show you how to know if it's happened to you. Basically, before I forget, tell your employer before you start working, I'm F1 or I'm J1, I'm within my first years, I don't pay these taxes. Let them know so they don't take them out, because they take them out automatically if you don't tell them. And that could be an issue. So this is what a W-2 looks like. Sorry, it's a little blurry, but the basic idea is in this box here, they will tell you how much they paid you in US source service income for wages that were paid to you for the course of the year. They'll give you your name of the employer, your names, the address of the employer, your name will be here, et cetera, et cetera. But the main thing you're looking for to report is how much taxable income you had. And that is everybody. If you get paid as a salary or a wage earner, you have that. They'll tell you how much income tax they took out for you, which you get credit for. You don't lose that. It goes right into the software. Don't worry about it. It figures out whether you are owed money back or whether it just goes towards how much you owe. But this is the boxes, this is the box. These are the boxes I want you to be aware of. If you get a W-2 back that has anything in these boxes, you got to stop and do the next thing, which is go to the next slide. I believe it's the next slide, and realize that you should not have anything in these boxes if you are international student within those years under the F1 or J1 visa status. And what you should then be doing is asking your employer to get the money back to you. If they don't, then you may want to give them this. Keep this slide when we give these slides out. Show your employer this slide either before you begin to work so they know, or if they took it out automatically and you didn't know it until later, show them this slide that they're not required to, and they shouldn't do this. They shouldn't be taking those taxes out. What you are supposed to do is ask your employer to refund any taxes like that, those taxes that they took out that they're not supposed to. In the event that they don't, here's the letter the Terp Tax put together. Follow this letter. Of course, you can always ask. You can always email me. There's my email address. You can email me at that email address down there, and I'll be glad to help you with any questions you have. But here's the steps you take to get that money refunded. So you shouldn't, that's the, I mean, that's, no, it's no use paying those taxes because you don't get those back. And unless you retire here, you're not going to be able to take money from our social security system anyhow. So it's a waste to see you pay that. All right, so summarization. If you see taxes in any of those boxes on your W-2, and what I would suggest is when you begin working, certainly before you begin working, but double check even after you begin working that they're not taking out FICA taxes. If they're not, great. If they are, and you're F1 or J1, then get them to stop as soon as possible and ask them to try to refund what they took out, which they can do. It's very easy for them to do it. Before we go further, I just want to say one thing. This status of not paying these FICA taxes, which is nice not to have to pay those, does not apply to J2 or F2. So in the event that you bring relatives along under those statuses, they do have to pay. They do have to pay those taxes.
Sam, can you go back to the W-2 boxes that you were sharing again, just for perfect? Just had a request. Sure. Now, Sam, will you cover what income should be reported? So, for example, if I earn income in my home country, am I reporting that to the United States government?
Okay, so as stated earlier, if you are a 1040 NR, non-resident, it's only U.S. source income. So in the event that you have interest from your home country, dividends, rental, wages, that is not reported here while you're 1040, not foreign source. So we use the not foreign source.
Great. So I guess another review question would like to ask it live. So if I have been here for more than 5 years and I have met the test to qualify as a resident alien, do I still need to file the 8843?
No, a resident does not file 8843 because your days do count. You don't file that. You don't file 1040 NR because you're a resident. You file 1040, and I don't want to get into it because it's 6 hours of discussion. But if you get to this point and you're filing a 1040, that's next week's webinar.
Excellent. So if I think that I'm listening to this session and that I would be qualifying based on what you've shared with me, that I should actually be filing as a resident, then I should attend next week's webinar.
Exactly.
Excellent. We'll make sure to put that information on the chat.
The good news, not just tongue in cheek, but somewhat tongue in cheek. The good news is that the tax rules for non-residents, maybe it's a couple hundred pages. The tax rules for these guys, it's over 10,000 pages. So
what year would you say? Would you say 2000? Anybody who's been here from 2016 onward? Because I'm getting questions about 2016 versus 2017, or.
So let's do the math. Let's start with 16. I'm going to count. I got to take off my shoes. Hold on. 18, 19, 20. So here's 5 calendar years. If you arrived here, That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In 2021, your days are going to count. Now, if you were here any day in those calendar years count. In the event that you weren't here all this year, or let's even say this year, then you only have 1, 2, 3, and you still have 2 more calendar years. But any day in any calendar year counts as a calendar year. It's that's the way it works. I know it may be. Let's see if we do one more example. Should we do one more example? Let's do one more example. Suppose you came in here to the United States in here we'll do this. You came in 2014 calendar year. You were here in 15, but then 16, 17, 18, 19, you went back home and you returned in 2020 for even just a day. These dots mean a day in each of these years, even just one day under the F1J1 status. So now you have 3 calendar years. You got a 4th one here, and you're still not up to number 5 until this year. So you're still free in 2022, and you will only become a resident in 2023 if you stay. So we'll draw zeros here. No days, and those years don't count. So you get 5 years. All right.
Great. A question that may or may not work. You may not, I'm not sure. So the question is, what if the employer's social security number on the W-2 form is different than my actual social security number?
Then you need to tell your employer, make a change, reissue the W-2.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you.
If the W-2 is wrong, they need to give you a W-2C. C means for corrected.
Okay. Do F1 students have to file taxes for income from the stock market trading? And is there a limit on the number of stock market trades that F1 students can legally do? This might be a question for Jody. Let me see if she's here. All right, I'll let you take the tax question, but I'll see if she can comment on the implications of employment.
And you want the question on capital gain answered?
Yes, please.
All right, so I looked this one up. Why did I look it up? One student asked me about cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency is considered to be like a stock. If you trade in crypto, if you trade in crypto, it's like stock. So we'll say it's the same thing as buying stocks. And should you do it while you're here in the US, while you are working here? If you're working here in any way, if you have any income from doing something here in the United States, whether it's a W-2 or as an independent contractor, or if you're getting paid as a research assistant, if you're working in the US, that means that the US has become your tax home. And it doesn't matter where you trade it, these will become taxable in the US. They become US sourced. Now, to report that goes beyond the scope of today's webinar, but needless to say, the software walks you through that pretty easy. And what do you pay tax on? Again, that's a little bit beyond the scope of today's webinar as to what degree is crypto taxed. It's taxed on the gain of your transactions, netted against your losses. Every time you trade crypto, it's considered to be a gain, either because you bought that crypto dollar at $1 and now you're using it for $1.25, so that's a gain of 25 cents. It's I know about it, I understand it, but it's a little bit beyond the scope here, but you do need to be aware of it.
Great, thanks. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Jody now. So Sam gave you the implications on tax and filing, and I know this can get a little confusing because your implications for tax versus your employment authorization are separate. Okay, so go ahead, Jody, if you can introduce yourself so folks online know who you are.
Should I stop sharing?
I think you're okay.
All right.
Hi, I'm Jody Heckman-Bose, Associate Director of International Students. And the question is a good one for our F1 and J1 students. Sam talked about the tax implications. In terms of employment, this is a tricky area for F1 and J1s. It can be considered work if you're trading regularly and really more as a job rather than passively. If it's a passive investment that you've put money in and let it there to grow, to change every now and then, then that's not really considered work. But if you're aggressively trading, it can be considered work in the United States. So if you are more of an aggressive trader, we would suggest that you reach out to immigration lawyer to see, where that line is, to make sure that you are not crossing the line of working without authorization. Because remember, as a F1 or J1 student, you always need permission to be working off campus, even as your own business or your own company. So just a word of warning there.
Thank you, Jody.
I wrote the letters EAD, Employment Authorization Document. That would be that's what you need to know whether the job you're going to do. Jody, isn't that the correct way? You need to get that if you're an F1?
Well, as an F1, while they're a student, there's something called curricular practical training, which would be work in their field of study. The EAD card typically comes after they are graduated and they're on their optional practical training. And any of that work would need to be in your field of study. So, someone who was not really in a business field in terms of it relating to their actual degree might not qualify to be able to be working as an aggressive trader, even with an employment authorization document, if it's not in their field of study.
Okay. I might chime in here and just let you know that even in the event that you work outside of what your visa status allows you to do, you still may have, if it's US source, you still have to pay income tax, or at least declare it and see if it causes you to have an income tax. It's probably not a good idea with your visa status to do that, but the IRS will still want you to report it and pay tax on it.
Excellent. Sam, I have more questions for you, but I want to make sure you get through your presentation. So I don't know if you want to finish.
All right, let's glide through and see what happens. We're done with the FICA tax issue. Let's just talk about preparing the 1040-NR. Maybe that'll help answer a few more questions. We'll see. So we already know when you have to do this, when you're required to do a 1040-NR. Let's just take an example. This is a simple tax return, single individual, could be married, but if the spouse is not a resident alien or a green card holder or a US citizen, that spouse is not considered to be married for non-residents, so you'll be single. Dependents don't matter, so it doesn't matter whether you have children. That won't make a difference when you're under F1 for tax purposes. The number of years counts. This is a person still within that 5-year period. And India, so we know we have somebody with the US-India treaty to get the standard deduction. So that's the facts. Let's see how it works out. So the form will allow for a lot of different sources of income, and you'll get documents which will show where the income came from. The US has a pretty good reporting system to let you know what has to be considered taxable. So you'll probably have either W-2s or Form 1099s that we spoke about. And as we just talked about with Jody, that you are allowed to work in certain ways under your visa status, but you still have to report all income, even if it violates your visa status. Here's what your form would look like. You'll put your name at the top and your address. The address should be the mailing address while you're here in the US. If you're anticipating leaving soon, then you'd want to put your future address so the IRS has a way to communicate with you. Dependents don't count for all of us, so that won't apply to you. You see that this is where the W-2 wages come from. See, it's right there attached to W-2. So you'll put it in there. If you're electronically filing, you don't have to attach anything. This is pointing out that you may have scholarships that are taxable. You'll have to report how much you got in scholarship. It may not be taxable, but you have to report how much you got and then show either under a treaty how much is not taxable or if none of it's taxable. We'll talk about a little bit more about it now. Let's see what we can find. Let's talk about the taxation of scholarships and fellowships. A little bit of a complicated area because you get two things going for you. You have to first know what's taxable, and then you have to know if there's a treaty exemption for you, for your country. So all amounts paid to non-residents in the form of scholarships, we'll just read this together. All amounts paid in the form of scholarship, fellowships, grants, financial aid, which are not excludable from gross income as qualified scholarship. So that's not taxable. So the first thing to do is qualified scholarship is not taxable. We have to define what that is, but it still has to be reported. Or we should say, if it's not qualified scholarship, it does have to report it and may be taxable, maybe not. So let's go back and just say, let's define what qualified scholarship is, so we can define what is not qualified scholarship, and then we'll take it from there. So qualified scholarship is the amount received that covers these items and only these items: tuition fees, books, supplies, and equipment. So if that's what your scholarship was for and nothing more, then you have a qualified scholarship only. If you got more than that, if you got some for room and board or some living expenses, now you have partially qualified scholarship monies and partially non-qualified scholarship monies. Don't panic, because it doesn't mean anything yet, but at least you know that you have non-qualified scholarship and you do have to file the 1040 NR. So the non-qualified scholarship is an amount issued for travel, room, board, research, things like that. It will be subject, it may be subject to tax. It may be subject to tax. Usually the rate is 14% under the treaty or under the particular type of non-qualified scholarship you get. And most institutions paying you this will file and take care of the taxes for you on Form 1042-S. And they will give you that form at the end of the year, either in January, February, or March. They should give that, and they'll show what they did. It'll be coded, the amount will be there, they take care of it for you. It's what's called a withholding tax at 14% rate. So they do all the work for you, and you usually don't have to worry about it. You do need to understand why there's tax taken out on your scholarship. This is why, because it turned out to be some part of it was non-qualified, above and beyond your fees, tuition, supplies, etc. This is probably what the school does. This is just the generality. What most schools do is they show you the 14% taxation on your bill. So if you saw it and you were wondering, or someone told you, now you know. And there you go. You'll get a Form 1042-S, which will summarize. You may get more than one. So they may give you more than one 1042-S. It depends on your situation. You may have some scholarships that are totally non-taxable, so they'll give you one 1042-S for that. You may have some other monies that they paid you for as a research assistant, which may or may not have shown up on the W-2. In that case, they'll give you a Form 1042-S. The good news is that University of Maryland does, in payroll, they do a great job of understanding what you need to get and what to do with the monies that they're paying you. However, the 1042-S you do take to the software or to Terp Tax or to Sprint Tax or to Glacier, you take it, you're going to use it to file your form. You're going to be inputting that information somewhere. So the 1042-S will be an input item, regardless of whether there's tax or not. So you'll input it into the software so the software can do its job. Here's a little calculation. We'll just go through it quickly. Suppose the total scholarship was this. If the qualified scholarship turned out to be this total, then the subtraction between this number and the qualified amount will give you the unqualified amount, and you may pay 14% tax on that. Some countries, China being one of them, have in their treaties where it doesn't matter whether it's qualified or unqualified, the scholarship is still not considered taxable. Some treaties are like that, in which case your 1042-S, if you're from China, will either show that it's exempt, or maybe they don't even give you one. It depends on the school. But the issue would be, you will know if you get the 1042-S what your situation is. You don't have to, in most cases, you don't have to know that this detail to figure that out, because the school or the payer of the scholarship should be filing the 1042-S to show how much is exempt under your treaty or how much is taxable under your treaty. And then they would pay the 14% tax if that's the rate that applies. So that's sort of an automatic pilot. I just want you to know. Here's your wages. Here's the income that would be exempt. Notice that Schedule OI is going to show that. Again, the software does this, so don't get too alarmed at my describing this. I'm just showing you that if it's input correctly, you will see these kinds of things on your return. This is a student from India, so that's why they got in 2020 the full standard deduction. If you're not from India, the amount that we go in here will either be zero or a small amount of the state income tax that you paid, or if you gave some charity, you can put that in there too. This is just a fraction of a slide to sort of show you that residents get all kinds of tax breaks. What are they? You can deduct certain tuition and fees if there wasn't paid by scholarship. You get tax credits if you paid out of your own pocket for tuition. Two different types of tax credits which reduce your taxes. We don't have to go into what's a credit. We can just all we need to say is that these types of things save residents lots of money. These are 1040 regular people, not 1040 NR. This is your column if you're a 1040 non-resident. And notice that the only exception, the only exception to all these tax breaks is student loan interest deduction, which for most of you is fairly unlikely while you're here. Even if you take student loans, you're probably not paying them back till after you graduate. But that's about the only exception that it applies to non-residents in the United States. Just about any other kind of tax credit. You might hear about the earned income credit, forget it, doesn't apply to you. You might hear about the child care credit, doesn't apply to you. The child care tax credit doesn't apply. So it's almost like if it has the word credit in it, it doesn't apply to you, almost.
So I'm going to take us back just a little bit. So Sam mentioned the 1042S that's issued. So if the University of Maryland is issuing your document 1042S, you will receive that around mid-March. So I just wanted to give you that date now. So that means that you probably, Sam, am I correct in saying that you probably want to wait to file your taxes until that's been given to you because you want to know what that number says?
That's a really good point. I'm glad you did that because that is absolutely true. If you go, you can go to Terp Tax early. There's no law that says you can't come early. But what will happen is you'll give us your information, we'll input it, we'll see that the 1042S is missing. We'll say, are you getting one? You might say yes, or you might not know. You'll check. If you're going to be getting one, we can't finish the return. We have to have it to finish the return.
So if I am a graduate student here at the University of Maryland, I'm getting tuition remission, then I am getting a 1042S because I am getting a sort of scholarship. So presumably
Exactly.
I am in that boat that I must wait.
Exactly. Well said. Yeah. So you
Okay,
must
great.
wait.
So
Yeah.
can you just walk me through for a second? I'm getting some questions about Terp Tax process. So if I go to Terp Tax, I know that I have a 42S that I haven't received. I have my meeting. What happens after that?
So what they'll do is they'll put you into, you'll have a file where you upload your documents. And what you'll be doing is you'll upload what documents you have if you go early. And then when you get the 1042S, you'll upload it. And I think they either already have a process or you'll just send an email to the person who's preparing your return when you do upload the 1042S, and you'll say, I just finished it. Now you have everything. Please go ahead and complete the return.
Okay, great. I always think that this is specific to a couple students, but we do have students that are residents of multiple countries or citizens of multiple countries. So one student particularly saying when he filled out the 13614 NR in that form, if my resident country to which I have citizenship is different from the passport where I have my visa, what do I submit to Terp Tax?
Well, you definitely, okay, so for our purposes, what we need to, man, this is causing my brain to move.
I know, so maybe we can not answer that.
Well, the first thing that comes to mind, my knee-jerk reaction is, generally speaking, what gets involved is which treaty can you use? That's the only thing that we're concerned about. We're not concerned about what your passport says. We're not concerned about what your residency is. Really, our only concern is which of those different countries can we use your treaty? Which one applies? The general rule is the country you came from. It doesn't matter if let's say you were born in Russia, but you moved to Romania and you've been there in the last 5 years and you became a resident of Romania under their rules, you were considered a resident. And then you came to the United States. My knee-jerk reaction is we can only use the US-Romania treaty as opposed to the US-Russian treaty. So that's the only time it would be of concern to us.
Great.
Okay. Lots of good questions. All right, I think we're in the summarization mode to some extent. We may hit some new points, but we're somewhere on the home stretch here. So let's see what we got. See how much of this is like a recap so you can get it. Who must file? There's no minimum dollar amount of income. If you have any US source income, my recommendation is don't play games, file. Don't forget you have to file the 8843 regardless. We'll probably see a slide on that. But if you have any US source income, even if you know it's not taxable, still file to let the government see that you reported it, it's not taxable. There may be instructions that say you don't have to file in certain cases based on certain US source income that's not taxable. I wouldn't play any games. I would just file anyway. All right. Filing is required by non-residents who have taxable scholarships. So there you see, item 1, maybe you don't have taxable scholarships. You might say, I don't have to file. File anyway. If you have partially or totally exempt under a treaty, you must file. So number 2 is you must file. That's what number 2 means. So even if it's not going to be taxable under the treaty, you got to show the IRS, oh, this money I got, it's not taxable because of the treaty. The forms will do that for you. So don't get hung up on what I'm telling you to do. Just realize that that requires you to file. And any other, and I'll just say US source income for the most part. Now this is undoing what I just told you, but I'll go through it anyway. You're not required to file if you have income only from foreign sources, and that's true. If that's all you have, you don't have to file here in the United States. I would say that my caveat is only if it's US source. Now, if you have this income, technically you don't have to file, and that's the only income you have, US banks, and what do you see here? Technically, you don't have to file if that's the only income you have. But what I would do is don't make a mistake. It's US source, file anyway. You'll have zero tax. You'll be able to sleep at night knowing that you at least filed a return. And in the event that you had income that is taxable in the US that you didn't know about, at least you filed a return and you can say, hey, this is all I thought I had to do. I didn't know about this other one. I made a mistake. Not filing is not as good as saying I made a mistake and I didn't report that. Not filing is not as good as an excuse. So the word to the wise is file anyway. Okay, so here's the forms. If you have no income whatsoever, but you're F1, J1 within those years that we talked about earlier, everybody has to file that, 8843. It's the form that shows the government, I'm in those first years, days don't count. Number 2, if you are having any US source income whatsoever, then you're going to have to file at least the 1040 NR with the Schedule OI, which I don't put on there, but that'll come automatically. You'll have, even though you might not have any tax, any US source income. Well, you need an ITN. This means ITIN or social security number. So we don't have to pay attention to that right now. The main thing is you have to have a number to file, or you have to file a W-7 to get such a form. If you have no social security number, then you're going to file that along with your tax return. The 8233 is to show what tax treaty benefits you have. Software does it pretty much automatically. You don't need to worry about it. W-8 BEN, if you go to a bank and you're opening up an account at a financial institution and they're going to pay you US source income, your employer or the bank will give you that form to fill out. So let's not worry about that. But that's a form that you may see if you're opening up a US account. These 2 forms down at the bottom are if you're requesting Social Security tax refund. So that's only if you have to do it on your own. Again, the form was in a slide, the recommendations how to go about it are in a slide earlier in the deck. So look for that as to how you do it. But that's what those bottoms. So the big point is these are the main ones you want to be concerned about. This is it. Let's put that in a different color for crying out loud. There we go. That's the ones you got to worry about. And we'll emphasize this. Always file that. This is just reminding you that most things, most tax breaks don't apply to you. Like the earned income tax credit doesn't apply to you unless you happen to be married to a US citizen or a US permanent resident. So if you get married while you're here, my advice to you, my love advice to you is marry a US citizen, and then you can get some interesting tax breaks. All right.
For those of you not on the line, understand it was a joke, but
It's a joke. It's a joke, right? It's a joke. Oh, yeah. Our income tax law is a social economic misery because it tends to influence certain behaviors. Like if you are a US citizen and you get married and have lots of children, you pay less taxes. So you go figure it out why the US income tax system thinks that that's what they should encourage, that kind of behavior. That's our tax law for now. All right, other forms. Schedule OI comes automatically. 8843 automatically. You must do this every year, whether it's automatic or not. Make sure you get it. These are rare, but they might happen. So that's a summarization. Here's what the Schedule OI looks like. Just in case you didn't believe me that there is such a schedule, there it is. We don't have to go through it. It will show the IRS when you were here and what treaty benefits you're entitled to. That's what the schedule will do. There you go. This guy from India and the treaty benefits will show. Here's the form for filing for a refund for FICA taxes if they were taken out incorrectly, and the rest of the form is there. This is also showing you the form 8843. Oh no, this is the 8843. Sorry, let me go back. This is that form you have to file every year. So this is an important form. Let's spend a minute on this. Must file with those first 5 years. So this is that famous form we've been talking about, 8843. You have to file every year. We don't have to go through every line item, but the main thing to do is to show you what it does. Is it will show the government the years you were here and what was your visa status. And it will also tell you what country you're from, and your passport number goes on there. It's all a matter of information to the IRS. So this is more of an informational form, but it does accompany the 1040 non-resident. Teachers and trainers, that would go in that part 2, and students goes here. The form, the software does it automatically. And you sign. Okay. Filing your returns. Most software systems are going to do this electronically. So that's the point here. It's called e-filing, and it means you don't have to worry about mailing anything in. It automatically will get filed once you're done. The only time that it doesn't work is if your social security number or the ITIN number is not being matched by the IRS. If you don't have an ITIN and you can't get a social security, you're going to have to get an ITIN, and then you're going to have to do this manually. But I suggest you contact us. We'll put you in touch with somebody who might make that just a little bit easier for you to do. Okay, so the preparer will most probably e-file your returns. You'll get your refunds within 2 weeks. Don't believe that, not with the IRS way behind. But generally, that's what it was before the IRS got overloaded. Now, important, last but not least, state and city or local county tax returns could include counties. In Maryland, we have counties, and there's a separate tax for counties. They all are done on just one form. So there's only one state income tax to worry about because it's done automatically on one. But you need to know that you may not have treaty benefits under the state you live. Most states do not have treaty benefits. So most states, you're going to wind up finding that you have to pay tax. And you're going to say, but I didn't have to pay tax at on the federal form. And that's the way it is, because although there's a bunch of states that do follow the treaty exemptions and benefits, Maryland does not. So Maryland does not follow the treaty, and Maryland doesn't have years of non-resident. So you're automatically a resident of Maryland once you're here 183 days, regardless of your visa. So if you came here in June of 2021 you became a Maryland resident by the end of the year, and you must file a Maryland return.
So I'm going to complicate things further for those of you getting really excited. Now a Maryland resident. I get to pay in-state tuition. That is not, those are not connected terms.
Correct.
Nor is it connected to your federal tax. Nor is it connected to any number of other things. So just, yes, tax is a special beast. So I just wanted to point that out, have it in the recording, and make sure we understand. This is
Okay.
a state of Maryland tax filing connotation.
You jumped on,
interpretation.
Gabby, you jumped on that. Did any students put that in the chat box, jumping on that
No,
as
I
well?
think just like one.
Oh, okay. Okay. Gabby, you're hired, because that's the kind of people we like working for us, thinking about saving money. Even if it doesn't work, always be
Yes.
thinking about it. Okay, great, good deal. All right, here's the states. Many of them have tax. The ones that you see that have these gray, they have no state income tax. If you're thinking of moving outside of Maryland someday, that's where you want to target. Florida, Texas. All right. And this wraps it up. Legal disclaimer. My CPA firm partner said, make sure you disclaim that this was for educational purposes only. It's been a pleasure. We can still stay on to answer any questions.
Good. I've got more questions for you.
Go ahead.
Do I have to include any time that I was here as a tourist?
Oh, the answer would be yes. You may
Okay.
have to. Yeah, those
Great.
days do count. So you have to figure out whether that would make a difference. Yeah, you have to count those days.
Now this is talking about whether or not this counts as income. Does the fact that I have cash rewards and credit cashbacks, does that count as income?
Oh, from credit cards? No.
Correct.
No,
Okay.
that doesn't
Okay,
count.
great.
Yeah. So let's write that
Okay,
down.
I'm a graduate student with the university, but my address is in Virginia. My state taxes are automatically taken from Maryland. Do I need to pay state taxes in Virginia?
Oh boy, you live in Virginia, and you're going to the University of Maryland. Is that the circumstances?
That is correct.
And you're working in Maryland?
Yes.
So, so you should have told the employer, whoever the employer is, that you're living in Virginia, and
The
they
employer
would.
is the University of Maryland.
All right, so you probably didn't make that clear to them somehow, or it didn't work out, because they would have withheld the Virginia taxes. So yes, if you're living in Virginia, you need to file Virginia. What will happen is, not to get overly complicated, but what will happen is you'll file both. You'll file Virginia, you'll file Maryland. For Maryland, you'll get whatever taxes were held, you'll get those refunded, and that'll help you pay the Virginia tax, whatever you owe there. So you'll have to
Great.
file both.
Sam, can you summarize for me again? I'm getting a question about so the question is exactly, as a Maryland resident, do we file a 1040R or a 1040NR? So I think there's a little bit of confusion about the federal versus the state.
Yes, okay, good. Yes, states do not have non-residents. You either are a resident or you're not a resident. Well, they actually, let me restate that. They do have a non-resident return. They do, but you're either going to be, so it's, let's do it right. Let me answer this right for a change. That's not to say I didn't answer all the other questions right, but let's get this straight. If you're in a state greater than 183 days, you must file as a resident. That's going to be the rule in all states. If you're less than 183 days, you may either be filing as a non-resident or a part-year resident. You're going to have to bring that up with your tax preparer or the software you're using. It'll help you make that decision.
This is a review question, so I love it. So does the COVID relief fund count as income?
The COVID relief fund, what that went to students?
Yes.
Oh boy,
Mm.
that's one I don't know about. It doesn't sound like it's income. There, if you go to irs.gov, they have there is a publication that they have that describes in one page examples of taxable income and non-taxable. My guess is you're going to find that on the non-taxable side. but I don't have that at my fingertips. I'm not familiar. I haven't had that question before.
Okay, no problem.
I just don't think it's taxable, but yeah, I would say my gut reaction is it's probably not taxable.
Okay, so a couple of these questions we've already answered before. We're at the 121 mark, so right 1:30 we're going to close. But I have a question here that says, this might have been covered earlier, but maybe not. Were we eligible? But are we eligible for the $1,200 stimulus check?
If
we
you
were
are
at the
non,
university.
we did answer that before, but I won't hold it against you. No penalties. If you if you are a non-resident, you are not eligible for the stimulus. So stimulus is a no-go. If you got it, it's an indication. Am I spelling stimulus wrong? Yeah, probably. If you got the stimulus, it means you probably filed the wrong form, because if you filed 1040 NR, you would not have received it. And so it's probably an indication you filed a 1040 resident return, and now you need to see us to amend the prior returns if it's the wrong form that you filed, and then you're going to want to figure out how to get that money back to the government. Sorry to give you the bad news.
Well, it's good to know now. However, if you did do that, you can use Terp Tax to help you file the amendment and to help you through the process of paying those funds back that you were not eligible for.
Absolutely. As I said earlier, yeah, absolutely.
Yes, thank you, Sam. The next question is, I'm residing in Maryland, but I did a 3-month internship in the state of California. Then do I have to file both in California and Maryland?
You may. It depends on how they paid you. If they gave you a W-2 in California, you're going to have to file as a non-resident in California. Chances are you will get either all that. If they took any tax out for California, you'll get it all back, most likely. But if they gave you a W-2 with California tax, you will have to file in California. Again, non-resident.
And Sam, the time when the IRS is looking for presence in the United States, they are looking at irrelevant of the status, in my understanding, right? It doesn't matter if you're coming in as a visitor, it doesn't matter if you're coming in as an F1 or a J1, or is there a point where that matters? Because there are two different questions where students are asking, if I was originally here in J1 status and then I came back as an F1, correct? Okay, so those two
as it was
would
said
count.
earlier, days do not count for 5 years, 5 calendar years that you're here. The first 5 calendar years you're here. If you're J1 as a scholar or teacher or researcher, days do not count for 2 years. So you can't, it doesn't matter how many days you were here, you can't count those, you're non-resident. If you're here under any other status, well, there's a few other visa statuses where this applies, but I don't think we have those in the audience. But if you're here as a visitor, those days count. If you're here working or touring, those days count. But not when you are under these statuses. So if you came here under F1 and you're touring, don't count those days in the first 5 years.
Great. I think this next question is actually for Jody. Jody, the question I believe is referring to the F1 visa status. It says, I'm currently a graduate student, but still using my undergraduate F1. I haven't gotten back to my country and renew. Will it affect anything?
Yeah, no problem there. Your visa doesn't need to be valid to remain in the US, and it has no impact on the tax or determining whether or not you're over or under the 5 years. So it's irrelevant.
Thank you, Jody. And thank you, Sam. Okay, so I'm gonna just ask for one more question. Sam, when students are making their appointments for the Terp Tax, there are 2 things that are being asked of them if they are signing up for the non-resident alien appointment, which is the 14446 and then 13614-C. I'm just getting questions like, what is this form, or what are the forms?
Okay, and we didn't cover those because those are simply information forms for Terp Tax. They are used in order to help prepare your return, to help have them information that's readily available to them to do input to start the process with your address and your permission to share documents and so forth. So those are not forms that are required for the federal government or the state government. They're merely input interface between you and us.
Great. I know there were other questions that are here. What I want you to know is, remember, if you think that you have been in the United States for longer than 5 years and you may be coming on to the 1040, so the filing as a resident, you need to attend the next session next week, which I will post that on there. If you have listened to this presentation and you feel like you are a non-resident, which is most of our students are non-resident aliens for tax purposes at the federal level, you've got Terp Tax to help you go ahead and file your taxes. Your 1042-S is a document provided by presumably your university, which hopefully is us at the University of Maryland, and we will let you know whether or not, if you're getting tuition remission or scholarship, what is taxable. And you're going to need to wait until mid-March to get that. That information is coming to you via snail mail in the address the university has on file. If there are any problems with the W-2s, which you should have, and if you need to request a duplicate, we put that information on the chat, and that is if the University of Maryland is your employer. If there are issues with that, you need to request a W-2C, because you need to make sure that your social security number is listed correctly. If there are problems with any FICA taxes that were taken out of your W-2 but there shouldn't have been, you may get the letter from Sam and also on the FAQ from the ISSS website. If you would like to file, Terp Tax will help you with both your state filing and your federal filing. And you can start the process now, even if you don't have all the documentations that you need. And
I
sir.
would encourage you to maybe wait to start the process, because otherwise it's just extra work on everybody's part. So if you know you're going to get a 1042-S, I might encourage you to wait a little bit.
That's great. So if you don't have your 1040, don't worry. The filing deadline is April 18th. And again, as Sam has said, if for any reason you need an extension, it is not frowned upon and you don't get penalized for it, so long as you request the extension before the deadline.
Correct.
Excellent. We will be sending this information to you and everything that we've said here today, and your recording via email to everybody who registered and who's present. And I've received a link from the IRS where it is confirmed that you do not get, thank you to Jody, you do not get taxed on that COVID relief. If you received COVID relief as a student, it's not taxable. So you guys should feel better about that.
The power
thank you to Sam.
Google, that's the power. Thank you, Jody, for doing that. That shows you, students out there, that shows you the power of a Google search. You can get a lot of good information on taxes here in the U.S. for yourselves, even if you're F1 or J1, by just doing a simple Google search like Jody did. Also, just be aware of one area where you can't get good information, and that's about how you pay tax on crypto. I'm going to do an article for the Brain Trust. Take a look for that in the next couple of weeks on how that affects you as foreign students, because I saw a lot of websites with incorrect information on that. So if you're trading in crypto, watch the Brain Trust. Maybe we'll send it to Gabby and Debbie, and Amanda, and they can forward it to all of you as well.
Thank you, Sam. Always a pleasure. Like I said in the text, if you felt like this was a lecture, this very much was. Filing for income tax and state tax in the United States is very challenging, as this is the first time I've ever heard of it as a self-assessment. I've been living here for more than 20 years, and that makes a lot of sense to me as I hear those words. We're here to support you. We're here to help you. If you have questions, reach out to Terp Tax, to Sam, to ISSS. There are lots of the graduate school for supporting the program as well. There's so many opportunities for us to help you, and this is a challenging time. So make sure you review this information. If you got lost, we did too, and that's okay.
I was lost to begin with. So.
Just as a reminder, unfortunately, Debbie is not here because there was a fire alarm where she was, but I presume she's safe, so nobody worry. This is why I've taken over the debriefing and sign off. You'll receive the recording and also, I'm sure, a survey from all of us. Amanda, anything you'd like to say before we close?
No, thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you, Sam, for a wonderful presentation. And thank you to all the students for coming. Jody, huge thank you for the additional support.